Crop Talk on Market Journal is supported by Nebraska's soybean farmers and their checkoff. Finally, today we're going to take a look back to last week's corn production clinic that took place in Aurora to get some insights into corn diseases that producers should be keeping an eye on ahead of the upcoming growing season. Market Journal's Mike Straub joins us with more.
Nebraska Extension recently held a corn production clinic in Aurora, Nebraska. Tamara Jackson-Zims gives an update on this year's tar spot threat, where we can see it, and what to look out for.
Depending on where you're at in the state, my update for you is going to be different. And so looking out west, for instance, out in the Panhandle in western Nebraska, we don't have any tar spot in your immediate area. And so it's not close to you yet. And so I just say, just be vigilant and watchful of our updates, and you'll know when it does start to approach that part of the state. We aren't even completely sure how it will behave once it reaches that part of the state. And so otherwise, if you're in the central part of the state, we're letting people know that it has come to that part of the state. And in fact, we've confirmed it in all the counties along that Highway 281 corridor, from about Hastings, Grand Island north all the way to Holt County. And so in those counties, you're right on the edge of where the tar spot fungus has moved in. And so it was hard to find in many of those counties. There's not very much of it. And so right now it's more about making sure people understand what to look for. And so the black spots on corn leaves during the season, it really does look like someone dipped a paintbrush in black paint or tar and slung it across it. And so if you see black spots, especially on green leaf tissue, be sure and flip it over, look on the back side. And if it does pop through on the bottom side, it's probably tar spot. But the most common thing we see in the field that time of year is actually insect frass. And it's very confusing for people when they see black spots like that. So try to rub it off, and you might need to wet that leaf to get that off and rub pretty hard. And if you need help, just submit it to the Plant and Pest Diagnostic Clinic or one of the local county extension educators for help. Now on the eastern side of the state, the eastern third or so, tar spot has been there for the last 2 or 3 years now. And so in some areas, we've had some hot spots develop where disease has been more severe. And so in both the eastern and central parts of the state, I would start looking at hybrids for their tolerance to tar spot, talking to your agronomist, have a conversation about where to position hybrids where you might have seen the disease in the past, because there are differences in the genetics, although it's really difficult for seed companies to test for tar spot and to produce ratings right now. And so it's slowing down the availability of those types of ratings for us to use in seed catalogs. But agronomists are often aware of which ones may perform better in the presence of it, and so have that conversation. Sometimes a tolerant hybrid may not need a fungicide application. And with that said, not everybody's going to need a fungicide application anyway for tar spot. And so in the counties along eastern edge of Nebraska over into Iowa, down in Missouri, we know there's some places where they did have to spray. Disease developed early and it became quite severe where they had adequate moisture, and in some areas where we had pivot irrigation. And so that's something that we need to be cognizant about, is that we are creating an environment that's more favorable for some diseases, especially the one like tar spot caused by a fungus that's favored by wet leaves. And the longer those leaves are wet, the more favorable it is in general, we believe. And so we may end up talking more about irrigation management, and we do have research ongoing. A graduate student of mine, Talon Muse, is leading that, and it's sponsored by the Nebraska Corn Board and North Central IPM Center to help us learn more about tar spot development under irrigation and also under different parts of the pivot, because it may not be the same all the way across, and in fact it might be worse towards the pivot point where the inner spans move a little bit slower and the leaves are wetter longer. And so stay tuned for an update about that type of research. If you're to the point in 2024 though, where we see early disease development and we're seeing it become more severe on the plant, We do have very good fungicides to manage it. It's important which ones you select and at what stage you spray, though, to get the best efficacy. And so in general, we know that the 2- and 3-way products, that's the ones with active ingredients from 2 or 3 of our classes, do the best job controlling tar spot. And for most people, a single application is probably enough, although we do have data from our neighbors to the east on how sequential applications might work and which product and order might work the best too. And so timing, usually the sweet spot, at least in the data from the east, shows us about VT to R3 has kind of been the sweet spot for tar spot development for most people. Now, that's not always the case for everybody everywhere, and so we have to continue to scout and know when it starts to develop early in the season or later, and just be aware of where it is and how susceptible your hybrids are. And so if anyone has any questions, please reach out to us in Nebraska Extension and check out our resources there and also on the Crop Protection Network.
Depending on what part of the state you're located, tar spot will affect you in different ways. In the west, be sure to keep up on scouting as tar spot may make it your way. In the central and eastern part of Nebraska, it's important to pay attention to irrigation practices to help prevent the disease. If you've had tar spot problems in the past, investigate possible hybrids to keep tar spot out of your crops. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Mike Straub.